Hello, Sarah here. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to tell you about a very exciting opportunity we've got coming up for our next FBR Breathwork practitioner training. Our next FBR Breathwork practitioner training will start off in April. From the 7th to the 10th of April will be the first immersion. The second immersion will be from 12th to 15th of May. And then the last two immersions will be held in Bali, with the third immersion being from 13th of June to 19th of June, and the fourth immersion from 23rd of June to 26th of June. So that's essentially 2 weeks in Bali. The first two immersions will be facilitated and guided by Dan Kolapski and myself, Sarah de Klerk. And then the last two immersions, we will be joined in Bali by Edward Dangerfield, who is the founder of FBR Breathwork. This is an incredible opportunity to join an incredible, deep, profound, and spacious learning container that is not only going to facilitate you into becoming a skilled and practiced FBR Breathwork practitioner, but also really, shines a light on your own blind spots or your own opportunities for growth. So this is for those people that really want to get to know themselves in a more full and deep way, get to know their bodies, their mind, their spirit, through this practice of the breath in a way that they can become more intimate with themselves. I will say this is not for the faint-hearted. And the reason I say that is because I've sat in a lot of containers over the last years, and it's particularly these group containers, we have no more than 12 students coming through each training. And a group of 12 can be, a beautiful opportunity to get a lot of insight from all the people in the space. And often we get mirrored back our own blind spots or our own opportunities for growth. So I found that every time I sat in a training, even as a teacher, it shows me where I can grow. And I love that, I like that challenge. And if you are someone that also likes that challenge, then this is for you. So reach out to me if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the practitioner training. And if you want to know a little bit more information, there is an application process. As we are quite selective who we allow to come through the training as well. The main reasons for that is that we really want to allow safety for everyone in the container. So if you're interested, reach out to me and we can have a chat.
I'm Mel.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Beck. And this is We Are Woman. Today feels special. One of the deepest intentions behind this podcast has always been women sitting together in conversation, in honesty, in remembrance, to speak and to be heard. There's something ancient and sacred about women gathering in circle, stories shared as wisdom, one woman's becoming, offering another permission to soften, to rise, to remember herself. We are so grateful to have Emma Yeadon with us today. It's an honour when a woman entrusts us with her story. Not the polished version, but the lived one, the real one. Emma came to Bali in a season of change, and what unfolded became a journey of integration, embodiment, and reclamation. In this conversation, we explore healing the masculine and the feminine within, reclaiming embodied strength, and what it means to come home to your own power through presence. This is about sitting as sisters, listening, learning, witnessing. Welcome, Emma. Thank you so much for being here. So Mel, Sarah, and I obviously know you through FBR Breathwork, and it's amazing to get to have these colleagues all across the world. And I was very lucky to have met you in Byron, but obviously now you've moved back to the UK. So all I know of you really is through the breathwork, and I guess the best place for us to start today would be before that. So
Before FBR Breathwork entered your life, what was happening for you and what was the search that led you to Bali?
Yeah, thank you. I want to go right back to the beginning. So, yeah, it was 2022 now, 4 years ago, when I just kept hearing the call to go to Bali. And I was coming out of a 17-year relationship. I met my ex-partner when I was 17, and the relationship started to break down, yeah, around the age of 34. And during that time, I'd raised a beautiful stepdaughter from being a little baby. And I'd also been working as a primary school teacher during that entire time. So it was this number 17 around the relationship, the career, my stepdaughter. And then COVID came. And there was just this period where I had nowhere to go. There was no escape. I had to sit with what was coming up. And it was super healing. And then, like I said, the whispers just kept coming through to go to Bali, and I had no idea what it meant or what it was. I'd been in 2017 and connected to the place like so deeply, but this whisper was just about me going, and yeah. So I followed that call. It was the craziest year, 2022. I said yes to the whisper, and then once I'd said yes, everything just started to open up. So my beautiful boss gave me a sabbatical and I booked the flights. And yeah, it just felt like the world was opening up to me and I was opening up to the world. It was the most magical time.
I really loved how you described that experience of COVID being a place for you to find that sort of stillness and hear those whispers and how healing that was. Could you, yeah, when you say the whispers came and they were telling you Bali, what was it that you arrived in Bali? Was breathwork on the agenda or it was something you stumbled into? How did that come about?
Again, there's so many synchronicities. I was looking back in my notes on my phone from even before COVID times, and it was just this list, and it had breath written on there so many times. Looking back through that the other day, breath work, nature, and during COVID time, I got to sit and watch seasons, and I got to be with myself. And yeah, like I said, the whisper took me to Bali, and then when I got there, I was surrounded by the most amazing people, like such amazing friends, and so much was happening. And there was just this excitement and awe and wonder at the world. And like I said, there was so much magic happening and so many doors opening. But there was like a deeper sense underneath that I'm here for something else.
Mm.
And I couldn't put a finger on what that was. And yeah, I'd been there about 2 months. And the first most amazing teacher came into my life, and it was meant to be a 10-minute meditation with a little bit of breath work in it. And it was the first time that I'd heard about anything like this. And yeah, we lay down to meditate and to breathe. And I just had this incredible experience with the breath and with myself. And I just had this, I look back on it now as an awakening moment of just wow, that we can feel this close to ourselves and feel these amazing feelings through something as simple as breathing. And I had, yeah, like I said, just this moment of absolute wow, what is this?
Mm. Thank you for speaking to the awakening piece, Emma. I feel what I've seen and heard from you and what I know of you from sitting in the space with you in the Breathwork Bali Shala, actually, which was super super fun to be in the space together. But yeah, like it sounds like as I hear your journey from the UK and having spent 17 years there in sort of a similar, like in sort of a same container, you were married, you had your job, you were raising your stepdaughter, and to me it sounds like is maybe COVID allowed all of that to pause, and the whispers that were maybe quietly there already, but they became maybe more obvious is kind of what I'm hearing. Or yeah, curious to hear how you experienced that. But yeah, that in of itself was an opening into this different way of living potentially, or a pathway into this different way of living and breathing, right? Like quite literally, but also maybe metaphorically, like in the sense of like what I'm hearing is that there's these doors that open. Like what comes up to mind for me when I hear your story, and it's so funny because I know you quite well, is sort of like this Alice in Wonderland kind of vibes. Like all of a sudden you found some sort of key, and somehow Bali sort of facilitated that or something, to these tiny doors that you could open with this tiny key, and then the doors opened and there was this other landscape that kind of emerged that was full of colors and brightness and possibilities and opportunities and joy. And yeah, how was that? What I'm curious about is how was the transition for you of coming out of that previous life chapter? How would you describe that life chapter? How was that life chapter for you? How did you experience that life chapter? And how did you feel the transition was from that into this really quite different chapter, right?
I would say it was the most challenging yet profound and incredible time. And I would say that I'm still integrating right now, 4 years later, after making that huge change. I agree with what you said there. My life was set out. And even though I was in a codependent relationship which was shaped by addiction, and working in a school with children who were lots of addiction and suffering and trauma, just heavy. Yeah, looking back, it was a real heavy life to be living. And yeah, going to Bali, it was almost it was such a shock to the system. There was so much excitement driving me forward and pulling me towards it, and then yeah, excitement and joy of all these doors opening and all the possibilities. But I wasn't in a place looking back to actually receive that and to really feel the joy that was available. It was this discovery of there's another way that I can live. And I think it was so in my head and trying to figure everything out and constantly living in, well, what's next? What next? What's the next career? What does this all mean?
Yeah, a huge transition. It sounds like almost coming out of the preconditioned path, which is laid out for us and for so many of us in so many different ways, right? And actually kind of stepping off that path is exciting, as you might describe, but from my own personal experience, it's also really quite scary and also quite overwhelming. It's like, oh, if I really take this path, am I going to be all right? Am I going to be, looked after and held in life? And it comes with career, finances, relationships, all the things that come with that, right? But it sounds like you made a really sort of courageous move there.
Yeah.
For me personally, if just from my personal experience, I know for myself, it was because I could no longer live in the previous way that I was living. Like it was an absolute, in some way, it was a necessity for me to make the change. So obviously there was a free choice in it, but it also was, the suffering became kind of quite loud to the point where I could not really live in the way that I was living. And so I needed to make the change. And I was wondering if you experience something similar or maybe in a different way, and just getting curious around what really made you take that leap. And the reason I asked that question is because I think it will be really inspiring for some people that might be listening to that might feel they're in a similar situation and might feel maybe stuck in their current situation and might not fully know a way out of that. And what I know from you, Emma, is that you really stepped into your courage with that. These are my words, so please correct me if that doesn't sound true for you. But and so I'm curious, like what really brought you into making this step, even though it might have been scary as well as exciting, right, at the same time. But yeah, what really made you make that move?
Yeah, looking back, it was these crystal clear moments where the clarity came up and there was just no way that I couldn't respond to what was coming up. So at 25, I had another moment where I realized that I wasn't my thoughts and I wasn't my anxieties. And what led me to that was a huge panic attack. And that was a pivotal moment. Then what I noticed looking back is that I pushed that away and just continued with the cycle of life. And then it was another 5 years later where the next moment came, where it was, something happened in my relationship, and it was just an absolute clear moment of this cannot continue. And it was these little moments where it was terrifying. And of course, I went back from them and went back and forth. But it was almost like these moments came and I couldn't ignore them. And my body was starting to get louder as well. And I have the language and vocabulary around it now. But looking back, I had no idea what was happening. My skin was complete mess, flare-ups and eczema, migraines. I was having the migraines that I would be complete. I wouldn't be able to see. And yeah, my digestive system as well. I remember getting to Bali and going to see like a masseuse and a healer, and she was just pressing on this hard mass in my stomach, but I had no connection. I probably never even spent any time pressing into my stomach and into my organs. And it's just all of these realizations of how my body was trying to communicate this cannot continue.
It's funny because both of you describe this sense of I had no choice. I know, Sarah, you mentioned, and then Emma, you've just said the same thing. And while I hear I have no choice, I also see that so many people resist that choice anyway, that it comes to a point where I can't do anything else other than to do this different thing. And yet so many people don't leap. And it really takes so much courage to know that I have no choice. It's so different. I don't know what's on the other side, and I'm going to do it anyway. And I just really want to honor both of you in that, because while both of you said I had no choice, ultimately, I think a lot of us still see it as a choice at that point and still feel like the safer option is the best option, whereas the safer option is the safer option. It's not necessarily the right option. I mean, what is right anyway? But yeah, just really, really honoring that, because I'm hearing you say I have no choice, and yet I see this in myself, and I see this in so many people I work with, that they'll say that and then not leap.
Yeah, thanks, Beck. Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, Emma, particularly in your case, in terms of what you were describing in how your life was, it was really quite a profound shift. And yeah, I fully agree with you, Beck, around it only seems safe for that option because it's familiar. It's the familiarity that makes it safe, but it's not actually safer. It's like the whole thing around like what is safe is like we can have a whole discussion around that. But often what I've seen, at least, and if you really zoom out, it's not actually safer. It's actually just the familiarity what makes it safe. And now what I see when I work one-on-one with clients, in particular when they have more traumatic earlier years in their life, or they're in it at the moment, to actually move into a place of joy and expansion and brightness. And Emma, as you spoke into it, allowing themselves to actually receive the goodness of life is, for most of us, more scary than staying in the quote unquote suffering or in the heavier emotions, if that's what we've been used to more. Yeah. And I think Brene Brown speaks to this so beautifully. She says, like, actually the most vulnerable emotion, like we think of like, what's the most difficult emotion to feel? And then we think of like shame or grief or anger or immense loss and things like that, which are obviously very difficult emotions to feel. But actually, from her research, what came out is like one of the actual most difficult emotions to feel is actually joy, like actual full joy. And Emma, yeah, just circling back to you, because what I know from you and what I've seen in you in the Shala in Breathwork Bali, and the time we spent together afterwards in Byron together as well that year, is that you're so from a lot of people that I know, you're so willing to lean into that joy and allow like your call it like your little girl to come out and to come forward. So it's such a beautiful gift of yours, is what I find. And it's probably the gift that you bring to your clients as well, as you also work now one-on-one with this practice with FBR as well, with your clients. And Yeah, like it sounds like you came from this background where there was quite a bit of suffering in your environment with the children you were teaching in the school, relationships around you, just the environment that you were in. There was quite a bit of suffering going on. And now you're back in that same environment and you're sharing the power of this breath work. And I do want to circle back to the in-between chapter in a moment as well, but I just want to ask this question around, you're sharing this work now. How can you be different with the suffering now potentially? Because you're in a similar environment, is my understanding, or you at least you're back in the UK. What has changed for you?
So many things. My mind's going to so many things that I could touch on. The first thing that comes up is there's almost a distance from it, and through deep work with the breath, from working with you, Sarah, and spiritual inquiry and all the work that I've done, it feels like I'm not it anymore. Whereas prior to that, I was so enmeshed in it viscerally, like I could feel the suffering that I was in, but I could feel everyone else's. And I took it on as my own. And after discovering and learning about personality types, and so much has been uncovered, and I can see why I was so enmeshed in it. And it's the rescuer and the fawning, the people pleasing, coming back to similar situations, the same people have come back into my field, and just seeing it through a different lens, I suppose, and some distance from it. A lot more genuine compassion as well. I think before it started to become normal. It started to become just a regular Tuesday that this child was coming to school with this issue, or my partner was suffering with whatever it is that he was going through. And I've really felt deep compassion, and there's so many avenues I could go off with that one, but I think that's the main.
I think that's so beautiful what you're speaking into there. Thank you for sharing that, because that has been exactly my experience also working with the breath, and particularly with FBR breathwork in this way, is that it really allows us to, in the breath session itself, it allows us to breathe into and be with the emotions and the patterns, which also includes the breath patterns that it comes with certain nervous system states, certain thoughts, certain emotions, certain behaviors, and how that we can see that more clearly from a little bit more distance, or from a little bit more spaciousness. So it's kind of like and that it's different to disassociation or detachment. That's not what it is. It's actually a real intimate relationship with what's going on in our bodies. And that's what I feel this technique really teaches us, is we get to be really intimate with these parts in our bodies, but from a wider scope, from a wider lens. We get to look into them or be with them. And then we get to integrate these more difficult, challenging experiences or emotions that we have either experienced in our life, or emotions that we haven't yet processed fully. We get to be with that in a more spacious way. And I think that is really the power of this technique. It's the awareness of the spaciousness around what once was, that allows the facilitation of a healing and completion of an incomplete reflex. And so there's the memory is fully there, right? We can fully remember how it was. That at least in my experience and what I hear from my clients, we can fully remember what was very clearly, but it's sort of the emotional charge is no longer there, because the emotions have been processed. And then also we might see it through a wider lens, where we can see that as a part of reality, there is just a reality of suffering, and that isn't necessarily heavy or a burden or dark or whatever. It's actually, we get to be and see that in a different light, and that's been quite profound for me as well personally. But I love you sharing that, because I feel like that's the real power of what we're teaching with this modality, and what we're practicing is being fully with the emotion more so than ever before. And in that, allowing a more spaciousness around the emotions and the experiences, which then allows for so much more spaciousness and possibilities in life, and actually a more wide scope of what we can experience, which then informs our capacity to move and operate and act in the world, which we can call resilience. Like, we have more resilience in the world. So It sounds like the breath facilitated that for you, Emma, with like the capacity to hold more with greater ease, and find more resilience in that, and then actually be of service to your community now back in the UK with this modality, and help them, support them in potentially finding more spaciousness in themselves as well.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And that was my experience in Bali, going into these breathwork sessions and into the training and self-breathing, but being held by the facilitator and being guided into these different emotions, and feeling the profound joy, but also like at moments real shame, and just all of the different and being able to witness them all and be with them and feel them and be guided by the breath and the practitioner and the whole. The word resilience is coming up massively for me, to be able to be with all of that. And then when I'm working with clients, and being with around members of my family and friends, being able to hold them in that, but from a completely different place now. Like I can, it's been incredible. It really has changed my life.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a steadiness there that wasn't before. And so is that steadiness something that, and choose your language, by the way, if steadiness isn't the right language, but to me, as you're describing that, it sounds like we talk about what's regulated, right? And there's a sense, I think, if you look at social media, that regulation is always calm and, sitting there in peace, whatever that looks like. But I think of regulated as, oh my goodness, I can be with this shame, which I can't always do. And the regulated is the resilience, right? To be able to be with what's there, to be with and enjoy the joy, to be steady in moments of shame, to hold yourself through fear or whatever that looks like, and to sort of grow your capacity to be with all of that. And so you've talked about breathwork being a really beautiful way to support you through that and developing that level of resilience. Were there any other supports there, any other things that you've done that have really supported you to grow your capacity and grow your window of regulation?
Yeah, I would say so. I dive deep with the breath with FBR, and there was this. So before that, I'd spent a lot of time in therapy and doing a lot of mind stuff, and that was incredible. And just devouring the books and being able to really speak the language around it all, and then taking that into the breath and FBR. I think a lot of it then was able to come into my body and be embodied, and start to make that connection and feel it. And then it's almost like the pendulum swung so far into my body. And then that deepening almost needed a bit more understanding around it all. And that's when I began my journey with Sarah, with you, and with Dan, working with spiritual inquiry and somatic work, all the stuff that I'd embodied, and all of the work around breathwork, giving that an updated language, maybe a framework for it to hang on. And during that time, that's when sitting practice was introduced to me, which I've continued. Every single morning, it's the easiest thing in the world for me to just sit in whatever's coming up. So it's just been transformative as well.
Yeah, and do you want to tell the listener, because that language might not be common or something that people understand, do you want to explain what sitting practice is?
Yeah, so before that was introduced to me, I would say, oh, I don't meditate, or I can't meditate. I don't think I'd really properly tried to sit in stillness. And the way it was introduced by Sarah and Dan was, yes, just sitting on a chair and sitting for, I think it said 20 minutes to begin with. And then that time was just widened and widened, and I can sit for, an hour. And at times it can be really challenging, and sitting with what is coming up, maybe thoughts or sensations in the body. And then other times it's really peaceful and quiet and there's nothing happening. It's just, such a beautiful experience. So I've kept that name for it, sitting practice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Yeah, I'll add to that the reason we call it sitting practice is because often with meditation practices, there's quite a bit of frames around what that is and how do you meditate and how does one do it right or wrong or whatever. And there's quite a bit of beliefs around it. And there's also so many different practices of meditation that we can explore. So I've done a 10-day Vipassana, and that's a particular style of meditation, which is quite different than some other forms of meditation. But the reason we call it sitting practice, because particularly for people that are kind of starting with that kind of a practice, is to keep it super simple and to actually just take out all of the perceptions or ideas that we need to go somewhere with something that we're doing, and that we can just be, really. And that is quite a different way of exploring anything in the world for most of us. Like for most people, even most people that I see, there is some sort of, when they start working with me, which is obviously good, and we want to integrate these energies, there's some sort of outcome or some sort of desired outcome. Yeah, some sort of a desired, this is how I'm currently now, and this is where I want to go. And that is a beautiful thing, obviously, and that's really to be honored in a way that, we work towards a deeper sense of ourselves, a deeper embodiment, and a deeper coming home. And we want to really link that with this sense of like, and you're already whole and complete right now in this moment, and actually nothing needs to change. And when we merge those two perspectives, we get this beautiful alignment, actually, of what I would call masculine and feminine energies, which is that right now, everything is perfect in this moment. And in the right now, nothing is possibly wrong. Nothing is possibly needs to change. You don't need to develop yourself or become a better person or whatever the beliefs are. And there's a variety of different frames we can hold around it. And actually right now, this is the moment, right? This is it. This is life. And then also, can we combine it with a beautiful, healthy motivation towards evolution, towards expanding ourselves, towards a deepening of our being and a deeper coming alive into the world. And so those perspectives can be combined really beautifully. And thank you for taking on the practice, Emma. It's not always easy in the beginning as well. So it's so good to have seen you move through that. And then on your earlier point, Emma, really speaking to the combination of the mind and the body, and really combining the wisdom and the power of the mind and how we speak to ourselves really informs how we see ourselves, right? And then combining that with the true and actual embodiment of those words. And I find, for most of us, including myself, we need both. We need larger, I find actually the more embodiment work I do, so the more feelings I actually am allowed, quote unquote, or allowing myself to feel and hold bigger integration, the more I also need to sort of upgrade my perspectives around these different feelings so I can hold it in a larger frame. Because otherwise the feelings can be quite overwhelming, but the feelings are only really overwhelming when we don't have a bigger frame to hold it within. So I find a combination of the mind work and then the body work is particularly powerful with most people that I see. And sometimes we can have the pendulum swing a little bit, and then we come back to the middle a little bit more. And that's really such an important part to honor as well, because it's all really important part of the process.
It's funny that you describe that, because I think this is a pattern I'm really starting to notice now. I've done it. I've seen it. You've described it, Emma. I see it in so many clients where they start off here with all of the language. They read all the books. There's a cognitive knowing of, I can talk about attachment styles, or I can talk about my patterns, or I can describe them all. And yet here I am, and I'm still feeling this way. So the pattern sort of starts with I inquire through books and podcasts and all of that sort of knowledge, cognitive based. And then I move into, I find breath work or somatic work, and I start to feel it. And all this stuff that I've learned cognitively starts to make sense in my body. And oh, wow, now I understand what this pattern feels like, or this attachment feels like when someone does something, and I can feel it as it impacts me in whatever way. And so the pattern sort of moves from a cognitive knowing to really focusing in on the bodily processes and somatics and even breath work. And then, like you said, Sarah, well, both of you actually described, we almost go from one way all the way to the other. And then at some point, the pattern becomes a realization, oh, actually, I need both. And I really love this conversation because it's something I'm really witnessing, and it's just become so loud in my awareness recently of, oh yeah, we start, so many of us are starting off here, we end up here, and just naturally we find our way back to center. And when we find our way back to center, it really feels like that's the turning point, and that's where the magic happens, and that's where, I have good and bad days. I think that we all do experience the highs and lows, but we're much more resilient and we bounce back so much faster because we've got the polarities of tools to be able to support us through. As you said, Sarah, there's no problem in this moment. Whatever it is here, and I can be and I can hold it and I can inquire as to what it is, regardless of what it is. And I think that's such a beautiful, it's so beautiful to be working with practitioners that can have lenses across all of that as well, and support clients to come back to center in that way.
Yeah, I actually think it's quite fundamental, particularly in today's world where there is so many shifting perspectives so rapidly. So I've been also trained in really being able to assess quite quickly developmental stages of maturing and development through consciousness, and how humans mature through consciousness. And that is not linked to age, that is linked to their own expansion of their own perception of themselves and reality, and being able to integrate and hold more pieces with more and more complexity and nuance. And it's actually, as the younger generations come in, our consciousness is developing and growing up quite rapidly. And I already see it in my younger brother, who has realizations that I had later than him in life. And I think that's going to happen even more, particularly with the coming of AI, and the world is just becoming more complex. So what is that asking of us as humans is that we can hold more complexity, very simply put. And yeah, I think it's very essential and important to have more practitioners that can support people through these journeys in a really grounded and embodied way that actually helps the client understand where they're at. Because if you have a map, it can really help to bring peace to, oh, like, of course I'm feeling this. It makes a lot of sense why I'm feeling this overwhelm or this frustration with this thing in the world, or with myself, or whatever it may be, or with these people that I used to connect so much with these people, and I'm just no longer, I feel like an outsider. And that is actually, I celebrate that, because it's like, well, yeah, you're growing, right? You're changing, and potentially it's time to find a new tribe. And we tend to gravitate with our level of consciousness or awareness, we tend to gravitate towards where the most of the people in our environment are also operating. And it's very fascinating to see this in models. And I know from you, Emma, that yeah, the work that we've kind of done is really around integrating these super expansive perceptions that you were able to really move into, like these really kind of non-dual kind of perspectives. You would, like, in my perception, you have a very strong capacity to go there quite quickly and easily, like more than probably anyone I really know. Like, you have a very beautiful ability to have this Zen mind, almost like where you go into that space. And then there was also these younger parts that were maybe still in fear from the past or in certain experience that couldn't hold that perspective just yet. So I feel like our work, if I was to sort of summarize what we've done together, has been really around bringing those younger parts into that bigger perspectives, and that bigger perspective into that younger part, and really sort of climbing up and down the developmental ladder so that everything could more harmonize more together, all the parts and the different voices in mind. And that's always a continuous process for all of us, of course, but the different voices in mind, really allowing them to harmonize more. And I know for my journey, that's been really about, really for me, that's been around integrating the feminine aspect of myself. And what I mean by that is really allowing more softness and gentleness and just more flow and ease in life. And from working with you, Emma, it's been also for you, it's been about working with the feminine, but it's also been, from my perspective at least, and I'd be super curious to hear your thoughts on this, around almost also integrating the masculine more, maybe, and integrating this like oomph kind of power in yourself a bit more, and this like maybe I can, and I'm more of a strength coming forward, because I think that's why we were drawn to each other so much, because I kind of got to learn from you of how to be a bit more flowy and gentle and easeful in life, and sitting next to the rivers and enjoying that and being just in that expansive state with you. And then, I think what I was offering to you is more of that like kind of strong kind of way of being as well. But yes, super curious to hear this is my experience of our time together, but super curious to hear how you experienced that, Emma, and your perspective on if you were to say, like, was it the masculine energy you feel like was more of your work that you were integrating?
I'd like to first speak to when you spoke about the developmental ladder and about the expansiveness, and then you talked about the little child parts, the younger parts of me. And I would say I've just recently been sat with that, about how expansive these last few years have been. And again, it's a story that's coming up for me, and it's almost like there was this driven, we're doing the thing, we're doing the training, we're going to do. I was breathing 4 and 5 times a week at one point, and it was almost like I said earlier, the doors were open, and it was the next thing, and that was quite a drive. And it was almost like the child parts were like, we're not ready, we want to rest, we want to play, we want to. I think there was a lot of fear as well, like a lot of fearful child parts that maybe weren't on board or weren't listened to, and there was this drive that was like, we're doing it anyway, this real energy that was like, this is what we're doing, and there's a whole host of reasons why that was massively online, but there was this, looking back, there was this drive to the next thing, to the next fix, to the next thing that's going to make me whole or good enough and worthy. And so that's something that's just come through recently that makes sense.
There was a useful element to that as well, right? It was necessary.
Definitely, yeah. And it's maybe now catching up to, okay, which parts were really quite scared or taken along for the ride, and actually they're coming up more recently, and incredible that we have all these tools that I can then hold them in and give them space to be felt. And I've also been looking, because I think being in those environments, classroom environments, and holding 400 children in a hall sometimes with like 15 adults, like that, if I look back, there must have been like a real ability to be in that masculine energy, and to be able to plan and like set those containers and be able to have strong, solid boundaries and drive to the achievements that I can look back on. And I don't know if maybe everything just got like shook up, that all of the things that you are familiar with and that you know are now no longer here. And dotting between Bali and Byron, and just not having a real solid home base. there was an ability to flow with that. And maybe that was the first time that I'd really allowed myself to go off course and not have a plan. And I think in that, the masculine energy, yeah, I don't know, I'm getting a visual of just, it was so flowy and so uncontained that it was difficult to like get it back on track and on course. And it was a real, the word confusion's coming forward as well, like a confusing time of all these changes. Trying to get the reins almost felt terrifying and scary, and it was almost easier to just be like, oh well, I'm just gonna flow to whatever comes forward next. Yeah, it's what's making sense for me at this point, right? And like you said earlier about perspectives, I feel like they're constantly shifting and changing, but that story feels quite true to me at the moment.
So maybe we just met when you were more in that flowy flowy space. But it makes a lot of sense what you're saying around, and I think I see that a fair bit when people start to go more into their own discovery, that there is a moment of, because all the familiar structures or perceptions might be falling away, and there can be a moment of real like chaos, and bit lost in life, so to speak. And I love when people are saying I'm lost, because then you also know that there's a way. When you know you're lost, you also know there's a way, right? Otherwise you don't know how that you're lost. But I love you sharing that, Emma, because it sounds like it was a very explorative part of your life, which was very necessary, that it was just so different from your usual ways of operating.
I get a sense of you having almost like a bubble. So wherever the wind sort of is blowing, you're floating in this bubble, which is a really beautiful way to explore all of that sort of messiness of what's coming next, and just allowing and just sort of gently floating with it, as opposed to, I guess, my natural tendency, which is to try and overanalyze and fix it and get to the safety as quick as possible, especially if there's a lot going on. So I really love that. And this is the imagery I'm getting as you're talking. It might be completely different, but it's certainly, as you're speaking to that, I'm thinking, wow, this is something I can really bring into my own practice, this sort of beautiful floating with and being with and just going wherever it's requiring of me at this point, rather than, oh my God, where am I and how do I fix it and how do I get out of it, and how do I make everything safe again? So I just really want to honor you in that, because even just in this conversation, I'm thinking, wow, that is such a really beautiful practice in itself, really.
Sorry, I can also relate to that. It's almost like that was happening, but the analyzing and the trying to grip onto something safety-wise, something solid, was also happening. So it was this, when I say the confusion, it was the flow that I was in, but also really, anxious mind of trying to find the next thing, like I mentioned, and just, so it was like they were both, I was holding them both at the same time, and still am to some extent.
And at some point, I know you said you still are holding them to some extent, but at some point, one of them rose above the other, which it sounds like you did move into that more flow. What was it? Was there anything that became an allowing for you to do that? Or did you get halfway there and realize, oh, I've become more allowing? Yeah. How did that happen?
I would say FBR and breathwork, that in itself and going towards that, was the first time in my life that I was really sure about something. Like I just knew I had to train in it, and then I was just constantly breathing, and within that is like, that was the foundation. And then the humans that I met along the way and the connections and the places that I went to, it was almost, that was holding it all together. That was the container. And then being able to drop it into the breath and to be able to discern, be with myself and hear what it is the next step and what the next direction to go in. But I would say, yeah, bringing it back to the breath each time and getting more in tune with what are my yeses and what were my nos. And
I love that. Like, it sounds like if there is no plan for life for a little bit, yeah, if we've been walking the predictable path, and we actually have the courage then to step off of the path, it's like all of a sudden, this is what I experienced, but I think I'm hearing that in what you're saying, Emma, is like, oh, I'm responsible for my choices now. I don't actually need to follow this path about what society tells me or my parents sort of tell me. Not that my parents really tell me much about what to do, but I don't actually need to follow this path that I feel like I need to follow for whatever reason. And I actually can choose my own path here. And that comes with, for me, it came also with a whole bunch of confusion and fear of like, am I quote unquote doing the right thing? Am I is what I'm choosing really allowed or safe? And all of these questions come up. And I feel like that's quite a natural thing to come up when there is no plan ahead in terms of this is the path and this is the step you take. And because it's very laid out for us, right? For most of us, I mean, we go to school, then we go to higher education, we might go to uni, we might do some more education, we get a job, we might get a family, like it's quite like this is kind of the path which a lot of people also don't take, and there's many different ways of being in the world. But there's some sort of perceived safety in that for a lot of us, right? And it is on some level also, like what I've come to see is that there's a wisdom in that path as well. There's a wisdom in why it is the way that is. And it's actually, I believe, to keep a lot of people very also sane on some level, and actually just to wake up out of that a bit of a dream in some way as well is also, I mean, for me, it was also like on the brink of insanity a little bit around like, ooh, like I feel like, am I going crazy a little bit here? Because I can see through all these structures and I can see through all these, in my perceptions, illusions of like how we need to live our life and how we're supposed to be operating. But what's the alternative, right? And if that isn't necessarily there, for me, it was quite a confusing way of living until I found the alternative, which is sort of integrated into the system, but more in my own way. And I think like sort of what I'm hearing you, Emma, is like, that might be where you are now a little bit more, which is where you're quote unquote doing the same things that you were doing before, but in a different way, maybe. And it reminds me of this quote of like, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water or something. And then after enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. Like nothing changes in reality, but everything has changed on the inside, like everything in terms of how we see those things. And so, but yeah, maybe a momentary period of wandering, so to speak, in life of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of that might be required to just find like a real, more authentic way of being in the world and being in life. And then it's more free choice potentially to step, quote unquote, back into the system or to step back into these structures, but from a way, again, like from a way wider lens.
And it sounds like when you do step back into those structures, so much more of you is allowed to step in with you, which is really beautiful. I think what's really useful to just remind everyone, especially some of our listeners who might be thinking, well, sometimes I can hold all of that and sometimes I can't, that all of that is welcome as well. And it's as you do step into these spaces where it's all really confusing and I'm tearing down the structures that I've created for myself, there are going to be moments where we feel really good about that, where we're feeling like, yeah, I can take all of this on. And then other things are going to come in and, fears and doubts, I think, are really useful as well. But they'll come in and then other things will come in as well. So all of that is part of the dance. And I think what's really inspiring is to experience that dance, the sort of highs and lows and the messy mix of it all, and to continue on. And then, as you both describe, you get to go back into this space where I might have been before, and actually it's like I'm walking it in a whole new way, and how beautiful that is. So you don't have to go completely to something so different from previous structures. You can go back into them and feel that everything's allowed to be there, which can be really beautiful. But just a reminder that it is a dance, and sometimes it feels really flowing, and other times I'm sort of, two left feet about it, right? So thank you so much for sharing that, because I actually love hearing both of your points of view around this, because they're really similar and yet they are so unique at the same time as well. And it's just a reminder of the fact that we all have those stories within ourselves, and whatever they are, allow them in our own way as well, which I think is really important. Can I ask you, Emma, and sort of to shift focus a little bit, one thing that you bring into your practice is cacao, and I'm really interested in where your love of cacao came from, what drew you to that medicine.
So when I was training to be a practitioner with Breathwork Bali, another magical, beautiful human came into my field, and she trained me in how to sit with cacao. Experienced a dieta where I would sit with cacao every day before and training with her to hold space with it. And again, it was like the breath with the one breathwork journey, knowing that I wanted to train in that modality and to hold space like those humans. It was the same with cacao. It was this recognition and remembrance. I was in Bali quite a lot of the time on my own. So it's like we say she's a feminine, very gentle plant medicine. And I would sit with her in my little room in Bali every morning, sometimes on an evening as well, twice a day. And just it felt like I was with someone else. But I recognize now she was giving me the gift of being able to sit with myself. I was able to sit and breathe into my heart and to hear all the little whispers and all the little parts of me. And yeah, she gave me so much, and I've just continued, like sit in practice in the morning, like breath work. These are the three things that have just become my core foundations that stayed with me.
I love how you speak to her as a she. It's really I love that, because that's really kind of a way how we speak about these kind of medicines, right? That they're really these beings, really. Yeah. And that's how we can relate to any plants, right? Including like coffees and teas and all of these, or just plants and nature, in a way that really where you can recognize the aliveness of those beings. And I love that you're bringing that into your breathwork practices, right? Was my understanding. So you hold circles there. And my understanding was that the cacao is also really a heart opener. Can you say more about that? Like, why is it a heart opener? Or why is it often used in that way?
When I first started the training, I had the visualization of it just kept coming to me. The rainforest in South America, women and men sat in circles. There was the cacao curry in the center, serving the cacao, and it was about healing and people joining together, dancing, singing, movement, breath, and it was coming into the hearts and breathing. So that was the first visualization I got. And then during training, learned about the science behind it. So it comes from the theobroma tree, and its main ingredient is theobromine, which works on heart and the circulatory system. So there's the science part of it. There's also what its potency in used in ceremonies. And I always refer to her as a heart medicine. And from the experiences that I've had, it especially combined with the breath, I noticed my own heart space opening more when I've sat with her, and the breath being able to move through that space. And it really feels true to me that I sit in that space more when I'm when I'm working with cacao.
Yeah, you use cacao. It sounds like you do a lot of beautiful creative expression. I've seen some of the beautiful pottery you've been doing as part of the space that you hold, and obviously you use FBR Breathwork. And it looks like a lot of the space you hold is particularly for women. What do you think feels sacred to you about holding women in these sort of spaces of that style of ceremony?
The word hunger's coming forward for spaces like the ones that I sit in, and it's the circle, the community, and women being able to sit with one another and hold that space for one another. So in my most recent one, we talked about co-creation and how these circles are co-created, and with each breath, it's like permission for the woman next to her to relax her exhale and to drop a little bit deeper. And what's coming through is, yeah, so much. The women are so grateful for the space that is held for them to really go into what's arising in the moment for them, and to be able to feel whatever it is that needs to be felt, and to not feel judged or, yeah, any of the other things. And it's about the space, a really safe space for them to show up and be.
Yeah. And is there anything you would say to women who are curious about these sorts of spaces but haven't yet jumped into exploring what it's like to sit in circle?
I would say listen to those whispers. Listen to those whispers, and if there is something calling you into those spaces, take that next step, whether it be a cow ceremony or a one-to-one breathwork session, but take that little step, that next step, and listen to the whispers. That's what I did, and yeah, I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah, so beautiful. Full circle back to your moment in COVID whispers.
That's right. Follow the whispers.
Follow the whispers, because we know, don't we? I know that I've always known, but life and all of the patterns and conditioning, and for me, lots of trauma, and just covered that over. And yeah, these past few years has been about really getting in touch with that. That was always there, that voice, those whispers that I've always been trying to communicate, but wasn't able to hear them. So
For so many of us, COVID became such a traumatic experience, whereas the way you described it, it became a catalyst for you to be able to sit with those whispers and really honor the slowness that it created to be able to hear them loud and clear and, go to Bali and then make the decisions to do that as well.
Yeah, it's so beautiful and inspiring to hear you speak to how you've really managed to transmute these more challenging experiences in your life and these more challenging energies, I suppose, in your mind and body, and how you've really, really been able to transmute that into something very meaningful and light and positive, and how you now share that with the world. I think that is a very powerful and empowering message for a lot of people that might be listening, that is possible, like there's a possibility to move really into your beingness, and in a way that is like really true, and allowing that light to come forward more, despite the difficulties and the challenging, and actually that the light is where we can heal those parts of us. And it's for me, Emma, you're just like a really walking example of someone that has been through the rains, let's put it like that, and has been able to really transmute that energy. Like, it's really powerful. It's very inspiring. And I think that, like, you just as a woman in this world walking that is the gift in and of itself, right? And of course you share it in your circles and in your practice now as well with other people, but that you just as an embodied woman in that way is the real gift. And I think what I just want to honor in that is the immense integrity that I see in that, and how you've really come to this work through really your own application And I think it's very important that we recognize that in one another, because I think there's a lot of people that come to this work in very different ways, which is of course beautiful as well. There's different paths. But for me, there's just, and maybe that's just my own preference, I totally admit that, there is something about people that just have really walked through the fire and are now able to share this work in such a deep and meaningful way, because I believe that those are the people that also really can really help those in need, because they really come from a place of lived understanding and not just from cognition and books. And even though that is important, yeah, I don't know, like if I just zoom out in life, to me that is pretty much what it is about. It's the actual walking of this work that makes it real in the world. So I want to thank you so much for being such a beautiful inspiration for myself, and I hope for a lot of other people that have listened to this podcast as well, and feel inspired to do something similar, and or in their own way, of course, but walk through that fire and really know that there is a different way.
Yeah, you walking this path and sharing your story and being so open about it gives the people that you work with permission to do the same thing. And so, yeah, totally echoing Sarah. It was really lovely I didn't know a lot of your story because I was a little bit after you both. You were together in Bali. I wasn't, but I've loved the little snippets of Emma that I've had along the way. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure and an honor to have been able to share this space. And I've got so many takeaways from this hour that I've got to spend learning your story. So thank you. Before we let you go, and I know it's very late there, so we will let you go, but how can people find you?
At the moment, Instagram and my website are the best places to get up-to-date information. And yeah, I move around the UK quite a bit. So I'm in the south in Devon. I also work up north, and I'm supporting the FBR London crew with different events each month. And I'll also be back in Bali shortly to continue training and being breathed myself. So still in that moving around phase. Instagram and website are the places to go to.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you. Thank you, Beck. Thank you, Sarah.
So that brings to an end our conversation with Emma. Emma, thank you for your honesty, your depth, and your willingness to sit in this space with us. What feels so powerful in this conversation is the reminder that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about integrating what was always there, about meeting the parts of ourselves we've hidden, hardened, or forgotten, and allowing them to belong. To all the women listening, if something stirred in you today, trust that. When we hear another woman speak her truth, something in us recognizes our own. This is why we gather. This is why we sit in circle, to witness and to remember. Emma, we honor the path you're walking and the work you're bringing into the world. And to every woman listening, you are part of this circle too.